with his arm in a brace in Barcelona. So that's the latest in the Champions League. And Spurs, if you're just tuning in, really bad result. 2-2 draw away to PSV, gone full time. Spurs are 1 point from 3, and so probably not going through ahead of either Barca or Inter in Group B. So Ruaidhri O'Connor, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Joe.
There's a lot going on. There's loads to talk about. You were one of the many who got up with Conor Murray as well today.
Yes.
So you heard the gist of what he was saying there. He's cleared up the neck injury thing. It was kind of a whole strange saga. Still not entirely sure why. Maybe nobody didn't just come out initially and say anything, but it's not that big a deal ultimately. The big line I took from it was that he's been noticing a lot of chat about the other number 9, so he's focused on what do I have to do to come back and steal all their headlines, frankly. Conor Murray bristling over the last few weeks as Cooney, McGrath, Marmion get the headlines, so it's good that he's back. It's a pity he's missing November.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, never nice to hear that all that chat that we've been having for the last while has been much ado about nothing. The whole thing could have probably been handled a little bit better, but yeah, no, the key line, I suppose, is the fact that he's aiming to be back for that last Munster game in November against Zebre, maybe Edinburgh the following week, and then he hopes to be back for the cast back-to-backs. And while he may be saying he's worried about the other players in his position, he's so far ahead of them, he doesn't need to. I think in the end, having 4 months off or 3 months off in a World Cup year could end up being the best thing that ever happened to him. He does play an awful lot of rugby for both club and country. They're very reliant on him. He plays a lot of 80 minutes, a lot of 70. You know, he's the highest minutes of any player, I'd say, in this World Cup cycle. So yeah, it's good news. It's not serious. Never required surgery. You know, we've just got detail that we didn't have before, and that just clears up so much, and it does allow us to probably look forward to the rest of the season with that optimism, although going into the game against the All Blacks without him is quite the concern.
That is true. Joe Schmidt has named a 42-man squad today for those November internationals. Italy first up November 3rd in Soldier Field, Chicago. Then the 10th is Argentina at the Aviva Stadium, a Saturday 6:30 kickoff. And then November 17th, New Zealand is a 7 o'clock kickoff, also on a Saturday. So 3 uncapped players. Ross Byrne was on the Tour of Australia, and in come in Will Addison and Sammy Arnold. So Will Addison, I saw you writing about this morning and just talking about his attributes and appeals. Not least he's a real utility back.
Yeah,
so can he play right across the back line effectively?
I don't know of him playing 10. I stumbled upon his England under-20 team sheet from 2012 when he played against, I think, 6 members of this Ireland squad, and one who's playing on the wing that day. He's played at full-back and outside centre for Ulster so far this season. He just looks like a really clever, you know, Jarrah Payne-esque in terms of his intelligence, good option taker, brings other players into the game, is quick, strong, powerfully built. He's a leader. He captained Sale for a season already. He's 26, so he's a new cap, but he's coming in pretty much fully formed as a rugby player, and Joe Schmidt is a big fan. Towards the end of the last briefing we got from Joe in Australia, Addison had come into he managed to book his holidays for Melbourne the exact same week that Ireland were in Melbourne, strangely enough. He may have got a bit of a heads up on that, and he came in and trained, as you do in your holidays, and did a couple of days with the Ireland squad. So he's even been in the environment already. Okay. So Joe's had this guy on the map for a long time. He was linked with Munster and Ulster. Mike Haley ended up at Munster. He misses out this time, but I think has a chance still of making it long term. Addison is probably further ahead. He's just been a really key player for Ulster when he's played. Yeah. And I think he could start in Chicago quite conceivably, and he becomes a very interesting bench option for pretty much every game because he covers so many positions. And as we all know, when picking a World Cup squad, you know, versatility is a very, very handy thing to have in your locker.
Well, not least when you've named a 42-man squad, excluding Conor Murray and others, and you can only take 31 to World Cup. So Sammy Arnold's included. He's continued his good form from last year. I mean, generally for Arnold, one of his biggest problems is that even it seems Scannell and Farrell are the two everybody says will be ultimately Munster's strongest midfield partnership.
I'd say I thought Scannell was very unfortunate not to get into the squad. I would say he's probably playing a bit better than Arnold at this point, but Joe, again, he was in the camp before they went to Australia but didn't tour, was in during the Six Nations, as was Scannell. He was 24th man for pretty much every game in the Six Nations. So Arnold's been in and around it. He's very good, very powerful, good defensive operator. I think we've seen a bit of limitations in terms of his passing game over the last couple of years, but maybe Joe just wants to have another look at him with that USA game at the end in mind. Stuart McCluskey's back in. You know, a guy whose face doesn't ever seem to fit when it comes to Joe, but you know, he was in last November and wasn't back, but he's playing well. he offers something different. There is a bit of safety in numbers, I think, with 4 games over the 4 weeks. Before I came in, I was just working on a piece for tomorrow where I tried to game out what Joe Schmidt's going to do in the next 4 weeks and picked a 23-man squad for each game.
Well, that was a foolish waste of time.
I really regretted it after a few minutes, but like, there's some amount of quality in the squad, and it's going to be very interesting. Like, I think we're going to see him take a squad of around 26 to Chicago, leave the 16 that'll play against Argentina behind. I'm not sure will the coaches stay with them, but they'll drill in Carton House. Then there'll be a team for Argentina. Then it'll tweak slightly with the strongest team for New Zealand. And then a bit of a,
see where we are.
Yeah, see where we are, and play the young guys or the new guys against the US. So it's going to be an interesting month.
Your piece today reminded me that in 2015 we only took 2 scrum halves, and so
Madigan was the covering 9.
And I don't know, can we get away with that? With a covering number 9 again, but between Marmion and McGrath and Cooney, and then alongside Murray, obviously, that's going to be one of the big dilemmas.
Well, Cooney covers 10, so you could pick Carberry and Sexton with Cooney as your third choice 10, or Carberry covers 9, has played 9 in the past, so he could be. So if you're obviously picking across, I don't know. Can Addison play 10? Will we see him maybe slot in there at some stage? I know Rory Scannell can. That's the kind of maths that Joe's going to do, because
I guess one of our best clues is going to be who's number 9 for this November series.
Well, who's going to be number 9 against the All Blacks? That's the key. Probably Argentina. He probably needs to give Sexton and his partner a game beforehand. McGrath has the advantage of playing alongside him, is in good form, albeit didn't play that well in Toulouse at the weekend. Marmion's probably the man in possession.
Now, so Marmion being the man in possession, is this just based on his tackle on the wing against Australia and the England game in Dublin in 2017? No, you want to say just based
way of putting
you know
it.
what I mean?
He's never let Joe down.
That's what I'm getting at. Joe just has a trust in him.
Yeah, and he's having a good season. But he's not Joe's player. He's not. I don't think his box kicking is good enough to play the way that Ireland want to play, and is probably not consistent enough, but he has an unbelievable break and a very good pass. And when in the Connacht system, where keeping the ball alive is everything, he's really, really good, and quick tempo, all that sort of stuff. There's no Conor Murray in the squad. There's no other Conor Murray in the squad. Cooney's, not Conor Murray. He's his own man. McGrath's probably the closest to him, and I think his relationship with Sexton could edge him ahead, even though there are those concerns that we've all previously discussed about his pass. All of them have a flaw. Like Murray is essentially flawless, whereas these players, McGrath's a really good defender. Ireland use Murray in the front of the defensive line, which usually scrum halves are hidden. That's key. Marmion's a very brave player, but he probably isn't the defender that those are. There's pluses and minuses with all of them. My money would be on Marmion at this point, but it wouldn't surprise me to see Luke McGrath in there. And then you've got the guy who was the Ulster Player of the Year last year and is kicking goals and doing all sorts of stuff. So he's got to be in the mix as well. Plus, especially when Johnny sometimes isn't able to kick in the last 15, 20 minutes of games, like the European Cup final when the Nasiba kicked. So there's a lot of play.
And to be fair, don't get me wrong, that was a clunky way of phrasing the Marmion thing. I suppose I'm getting at the point that McGrath and Cooney are doing it in such big stage. We're not seeing as much of Marmion doing it for
That's the problem with Connacht being out of the European Champions Cup. They're in the Challenge Cup. It's not on telly. I'm sure Joe's getting the footage. But
I suppose when I'm talking to pundits or players about it, they're not seeing much of Marmion. And the 2 things they all say to me as well, he did make that tackle out in the wing, and 2017 in Dublin, he didn't let Joe down.
Joe does come back to that. He does come back to the day that he pitched Kieran Marmion on the wing, and he just performed, and I think he loves his attitude. I do think that Marmion has a lot. Joe is a coach who puts a lot of store in players having done it for him in the past. So I wouldn't dismiss that out of hand.
No.
But I think McGrath came on that England game and was really good as well. He didn't go to Australia. I wonder, was that more about his body than anything else? I think he's a real live contender. But then we saw on Sunday that McGrath isn't perfect yet. He's a very, very good player. Brilliant against Wasps, but under pressure when the breakdown was poor, his decision making let him down ultimately for the try. All of them are flawed. So it's who Joe's. You can be sure he's watched every minute of every Connacht match this season and has broken it down. He gets packages with each player. So he's seen all the Marmion stuff.
I haven't, to be fair.
No.
Is Rory best under big pressure for his starting spot? Do we think Sean Cronin scoring tries in Toulouse?
He could be if he wasn't captain, but the fact that they've named him captain again, they had a perfect opportunity there. The fact that he missed the summer tour and Peter Manny captained really well with assistance from Johnny Sexton, who's now the Leinster captain. They could have moved on. That was their perfect window. He's been named today as captain. O'Mahony and Sexton are vice captains. His throwing and Ulster scrum in Paris were both way under par. and that's a concern. Although he was at pains in the post-match interviews to stress that it wasn't all down to him, which was interesting. Previously on Saturday, he was saying, I don't feel old, it's other people are talking about it. He's definitely bigging up, I think he's aware that there is a bit of pressure, but I think Joe, I think he's as safe as anyone in the squad because he is the captain and has been named as it. And I think it's a big window for him. If he performs against the All Blacks, he captains them in the spring, and once you go into the Six Nations with a guy as your captain, 36 or 37, as he will be at the World Cup, you've kind of nailed your colours to that mask. And I think that is like the fact that we haven't seen much of anyone else other than Murray at 9. I think hooker is one of the big risk areas, and I think Scannell is probably the guy who can challenge him the most.
Okay. Do get your comments in. Heineken Star comment, as usual, on Wednesday Night Rugby, and there's good prizes up for grabs as well, including matchday tickets and some off-the-ball branded goodies. And I'm just seeing out of the corner of my eye, Liverpool have gone 2-0 up against Red Star Belgrade. It's Salah with his right foot. So Shaqiri played a ball in along the ground. Salah one touch with the left, and it's not the cleanest of strikes with his right foot, but the keeper goes to ground and Salah goes high and near post. So that is Liverpool 2-0 up and going along very nicely. Danny Cipriani got 3 weeks. I was curious to see what they would do with Cipriani. There's been so much talk. Kino obviously got 5 weeks. Initially Cipriani got 6, and then it was reduced due to his expression of remorse almost immediately after it happened, they said, and his good disciplinary record. However, 3 weeks is still not nothing. So this I would interpret as a real show of support for the referee and the new frontier that we now have for these tackles. What are you making of the whole discussion around it?
I'm surprised Danny Cipriani was given. I'm surprised he has a good record in the disciplinary courts of rugby, because his record elsewhere is not as clean.
That's a typical cheap shot out of you.
Maybe it is
needless.
We've talked about this a couple of times this season, and I think it's been a recurring theme.
But this season has been a line in the sand.
It has, and rightly so in some ways, but I just think red is not the colour. I've said it in here already that I think some sort of black card, Danny Cipriani did not go out to injure the Munster player on Saturday, Scannell, I think. He went high, the player dips down, he's got his technique wrong. I don't think he's going out to kill someone. He's not going out to cause serious injury. He has connected with the head, so he's done something wrong. But there's no malicious intent. You have to regulate it out of the game, but I think you have to a lot of people paid big money into Thomond Park on Saturday to watch a match. Now I've seen Munster fans saying we didn't care, we won the match anyway.
Flip it the other way.
But you're paying for a contest, and the contest is being affected by. Like the one in the Cass game, the red card in the Cass game was an absolute blatant red card. It was reckless to a massive extent. They still won anyway, which disproves the notion that you can't win with 14 men. But I'm uncomfortable with red cards being thrown out so much for things that are not. I don't think it's in the spirit of a red card, and it's ruining 15 on 15 contests. Whatever the people in the stadium, the neutrals watching at home are basically being deprived of a contest. So rugby's in a very awkward spot. There are obviously very valid reasons for trying to take head injuries out of the game, and the players are going to have to readjust their technique.
The big question for rugby is how quickly that now happens. If this is solved in the space of a month and we're done with it, then great. If this drags on for months and months and months, and we're sitting here in April watching a game, it's another one of those, then it'll be a dreadful season. The other issue
not really happening with the Irish provinces. It seems, I know there was a bit of footage about a CJ Stander shot on that but generally the Irish teams seem to have been able to readjust their technique and haven't been at fault with it. Their body positions have been very good. So there is a coaching element to it. Discipline is really prized within the Irish setup. That filters down from Joe.
So that suggests it's very doable then if the players across the board have a mind to do it.
Yeah, you're risking giving away offloads, and that's part of the reason players tackle high. I was a terrible tackler, and I tackled high all the time. I'd be terrible with these new laws. I just hated trying to get down low at a much lower level than these lads are playing at with much worse coaching. So, you have to be able to you have to play the rules, and if the rules are now saying that a high shot is a red card, well, that's worse than an offload. So if you're giving up an offload, but it depends on what the defence coach's message is, all that sort of stuff. If you're being penalised behind the scenes for missing that tackle or not preventing that offload, if you're being incentivised in certain ways, that's all at play. There's so much at play, but it's a mindset thing. I just like to see them regulate it without the red cards. And does Cipriani really deserve to sit out 3 weeks for a poor but not malicious tackle? I'm not sure. I like it. I'm not one of the game's gone soft people. I think it's it's really important that they do it. But I just wonder, can they be cleverer with it?
And then there's if you want to get very cynical, you saw 12 trees get away with a worse shot So you then wonder, well, if a referee sends a player off with an early red card for something like a Cipriani thing, does a 12 trees type think, I can get a shot in here now?
Well, yeah, and there's the other side of things, and they'll completely reject it out of hand, but our player's going to start dipping into contact to try and engage it. And then what happens on the try line? On the try line, everyone's going low, and they're all clashing upper body, because you've got a player just barely above the ground tackling a player just barely above the ground. Now, they haven't got a lot of momentum, but still, they're all high shots, because that's the only way you can get the guy.
So we're expressing some reservations, and yet the underlying feeling is, well, they have to do this at the same time.
Have to do something. And it's a bit of a blunt instrument. Maybe in 2 months' time it'll have all worked itself out. The test window is going to be very interesting. I mean, we have seen like red card in the second test of the Lions, which isn't this season, but Sonny Bill got done for it. So we have seen big games, impacted by it before. It's not that new, but it just seems to have been. It seems to be almost zero tolerance. 12 trees aside.
So a few things to mention. So and I'll type through the latest we can go here, because we're just going very, very slowly here. So I might come to the RFU strategic plan again another time. We can talk about it in more depth. So they want semi-finals minimum at the World Cup 19 and 23, 2 more Six Nations titles, 2 more European titles, 2 more Pro14 titles, 7's qualified for 2020 and World Series status as well. 210,000 players in the game, 5,000 female adult players, 450 female coaches, 300 plus women's and girls teams. All of these big ambitions. We'll come back to them in a second. One other piece of news from this week: the English Premiership is restructuring, and there's various bits and bobs, 35 match involvements a season, all that kind of stuff. The big loser, it seems, is going to be the Lions. So South Africa 2021 is going to be reduced. We knew that was happening anyway, but it's been cut to 5 weeks, going down to 8 matches. And in effect, the Guardian say here, reducing the number of matches by 2 means it's going to be hard for coaches to give every player in the squad a chance to play in one of the first 3 warm-up matches, contest for a place in the first test. With no midweek game between the first 2 matches of a series, a tour will end for many players halfway through, and it seems they'll only get hold of the players kind of a week before they set out to South Africa. John Spencer, who was the manager in 2017 of the Lions, says, who's going to want to take the task of coaching the Lions now? Are players at the end of long seasons prepared to risk reputational damage given the lack of time to prepare? This will damage the ethos of the Lions. Professional rugby is in a very pivotal point on a whole host of areas, not least how many games the players are going to play. It's looking increasingly like the Lions over the next 2 to 3 series is going to be really squeezed badly.
Absolutely, and you'd wonder who's speaking for them at these discussions. I mean, it's up to the unions, and they've a new managing director. John Feen's gone. They've a new guy. I can't remember his name offhand, but they have a new MD, and he needs to be at these tables. He needs to be fighting for the Lions, because the Lions are fighting for their lives. And it's easy, I think, in between Lions tours to forget how special they are, but that 2017 tour in New Zealand was the most incredible experience I've had covering rugby. It was superb. I was in South Africa in 2009, and they're just so special, and they are unique, and they do fall in non-big sporting windows. So there's nothing big on the Lions Tour summer, and suddenly rugby is everything. And this 3-test series just means everything. But we saw with the Geography 6, the whole concept being slightly undermined. Previous to that, you had players kind of who were on holidays getting drafted in, Shane Williams and Tom Court. We're seeing, like, will there be a squad for the first 3 weeks and then the rest they're sent home because their dirt trackers really aren't adding anything around test week? I mean, a lot of players were just on the tear for the last 3 weeks in New Zealand. They knew they didn't have a chance of getting in. Is that a good use of professional players' time? When do the RFU start going, well, hang on, get him home, we need him in September? There's so much pulling at these players. The Lions is definitely going to suffer, and someone needs to, they need an advocate. They need more than just, because the media are the ones pushing this. You don't hear a lot of, John Spencer's obviously spoken out, which is great. They don't have a coach, I guess. Gatland's.
Who do you ring to get a quote from?
Exactly. Yeah. But it'd be a huge shame if it is squeezed to that extent. Yeah,
totally agree. So we'll see how that plays out. It's really squeezed now in 2021. So a week before they fly.
There's not as many good teams in South Africa as well. So New Zealand's really high calibre of midweek game, where South Africa, it's going to be much more difficult to get meaningful contests. So less games actually kind of makes sense for South Africa in some ways.
Okay, fair point. Fixtures this weekend, by the way, we are on air here in our Wednesday rugby slot with Air Sport. So Friday, Ulster against Dragons is on Air Sport 2, kicks off at 5 to 8. Saturday then, Leinster away in Treviso against Benetton, that kicks off at 4 on Air Sport 1. And then Munster, Glasgow, Air Sport 1 as well, is at 5:15. Rory, we'll talk about that strategic plan another time. It's a busy time of the year. We'll read your piece tomorrow in the Irish Independent, no doubt. Thanks a million for coming in.
Thanks, Joe.
Cheers.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball
with Air Sport. Every Champions Cup and now every Pro14 game only on the Air Sport pack.
Great news! We've just won that new contract we've been waiting to hear about.
Means we'll need to hire new staff.
Yeah.